It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
In comparison to perhaps the tail end of last year, I'm definitely seeing less numbers through open for inspections. But that being said, the buyers coming through the properties are qualified and ready to transact. So whilst we are having lesser numbers and slightly more days on market, I'm not seeing a price adjustment across the marketplace.
And that is Samantha Linsdell, and welcome back to another Real Estate Podcast, your largest property podcast library in Australia, as we talk your property from Darwin to Hobart. And you can stream us, of course, anytime, anywhere on multiple platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Amazon. And if you've got a friend that doesn't listen to us, that is into real estate, let them know about us. It is a Wednesday, the middle of our working week, March the 26th. Here's a bit of a jaw dropper. The hammer went down on a Noosa property, $17.6 million, making it the highest auction result ever for the Sunshine Coast. Woohoo, that's a reasonable amount of money, isn't it? And real estate agents, if you're in New South Wales, take note of this from the fair trading. It's not messing around when it comes to misconduct. Now, they've launched a major crackdown after undercover cases of rental bond fraud and trust account mishandling. One of the biggest offenders, Vanessa Nguyen from Ray White Canley Heights, who has just been slapped with a 15-month correction order after she made 25 rental bond claims. Now, she's got to complete at least 180 hours of community service and pay back over $80,000 in compensation after New South Wales Fair Trading investigation revealed that she had taken more than $100,000 dishonestly from New South Wales rental bonds and a trust account managed at Ray White Canley Heights. So, yes, make sure that you are handling that money correctly. Otherwise, that's what happens. It all sort of catches up with you. Let's go from New South Wales and go to Canberra right now and catch up with Samantha Linsdell from Hive Property. And a very good morning to you, Samantha. Welcome into the Real Estate Breakfast. Might I add on that note that New South Wales and the ACT, they've got different laws in terms of quoting property and everything like that.
For sure. Thanks, Craig. Thanks for having me. Yes, New South Wales and ACT definitely have differing laws in a variety of areas in real estate. The most noticeable is how we quote property and how we price property in terms of advertising. New South Wales definitely have somewhat tighter laws than what the ACT do. I'm quite lucky and fortunate in the fact that I trade in both jurisdictions, but you do have to ensure that you are up to code in terms of fair trading in both New South Wales and ACT. I would say the most noticeable in New South Wales is how we advertise property in terms of method of sale. So in ACT, for instance, we can have an offers over approach or a buy negotiation approach in terms of asking price, whereas in New South Wales, we can't. It is a very tight legislation around how we advertise property in terms of a fixed price, price range, or an auction campaign. So your options are limited and it has to be within a 10% range. I also find one of the major differences, again, between New South Wales and ACT is the paperwork involved. We do have to issue a New South Wales fact sheet to clients upon or prior to signing, more importantly, whereas in ACT, that is not something that we have to do. We also obviously don't have to note down our quote price on auction campaigns, whereas New South Wales, we have to pop down any conversation in terms of pricing a property within the paperwork provided by New South Wales Fair Trading.
Wow, you're right across that. You know all the details. Well done.
Thank you.
Now, the federal election, let's talk about that because you are in Canberra. Often it stirs a little bit of a debate about its effect on the property market. Of course, you know, we have this sort of spring debate every year as to what is going to happen in the spring market. But as far as a federal election is concerned, does it really change buyer behaviour? Because Domain's latest report debunks the myth, showing that while political uncertainty can dampen confidence, elections don't directly slow property transactions. Is that a fair comment from your end?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, Craig. I think general consensus in the marketplace around election time is that a hold or a change in government won't necessarily affect the conditions immediately. So if you're currently on the market or thinking about coming to the market, you've got pretty clear optics on the conditions. And I think if there is going to be any change around that, it would be very short-lived. We generally see markets stabilise 3 to 6 months post-election. There's a variety of external and economic impacts that can obviously shift as well.
And Canberra's housing market is particularly sensitive to elections due to its high number of public servants. And with job uncertainty, that causes temporary slowdowns as seen in falling auction clearance rates around this time with an election. It is a time, I guess, for people to fear that possibly their jobs may sort of shift and move into other areas.
Absolutely. The ACT actually has, on average, 30% higher public service employees in the total workforce. So ACT currently has 42% of its total workforce within the public service area in comparison to, say, New South Wales or Victoria, which sits on average around 10%. I definitely do think that the clearance rates have been somewhat affected. So they are currently down about 10% to the mid-40s in comparison to the same time last year, showing that we are still battling other economic drivers putting pressure on confidence, though any positive change in government usually isn't transferred to the market seen until months following.
All right, we are talking to Samantha. She's right across all of the detail for us this morning there in Canberra. And when we come back, we'll have a look at inspections and also take a look at some historical data that shows no political party guarantees a stronger housing market. We'll talk about that after this.
Every morning from 6 a.m, we bring you the latest real estate news with diverse perspectives from leading industry experts. We deliver the most property podcasts across Australia every week. Remember, we are not a real estate company. We are 100% all about increasing your awareness and knowledge for buying and selling properties.
Now, if you are homeless, Sydney has to be the basket case out of any city in Australia to be living. How much of a focus then is there on Sydney? Because you simply do not want to be in Sydney if you are homeless. It is a dire situation.
Sydney is really ground zero for the housing crisis. I mentioned earlier that we had a People's Commission into the housing crisis and we had 2 days worth of hearings in Sydney and they were really brutal. They were really heart-wrenching. People were crying. We heard from people who were homeless. We heard from people who were on the brink of homelessness. And one of the really common things that we heard from people again and again was having to move constantly. So we heard from people who were moving like 7 or 8 times in the space of 7 or 8 years because rents kept going up and they couldn't afford to keep living where they were living. And so these are people who are really on the brink of homelessness. They're spending so much of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. They're moving, all the time just to stay in places that they can afford.
Each week, we bring you in-depth real estate discussions, including inspiring stories from homeowners, knowledgeable real estate professionals and economists. Whether you're a buyer, seller, or just a real estate enthusiast, we are your ultimate property podcast.
And it is a Real Estate Wednesday, middle of our working week, and we are in Canberra talking with Samantha. And I want to come back to the politics here, Samantha. As I mentioned just before the break, despite common beliefs, historical data shows that no political party guarantees, of course, a stronger housing market.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, Craig. Again, thanks for having me back. I think in terms of a Labor government, and obviously Canberra is very typically Labor focused, so a Labor government favours construction and infrastructure projects and generally supports first home buyer incentives. So a hold in the Labor government can definitely help boost confidence. And on the flip side, a Liberal government generally supports big businesses. So a changing government could definitely boost confidence in the big business spending, which naturally in itself does help stimulate the economy, therefore boosting confidence within the market of buyer and spending. So I don't foresee major impact of the upcoming election. And if there is an impact, I do think it'll be very short-lived.
And just in terms of your market there for 2025, I mean, how's it all going for you in Canberra?
Yeah, it's going really well in comparison to perhaps the tail end of last year. I'm definitely seeing less numbers through open for inspections. But that being said, the buyers coming through the properties are qualified and ready to transact. So whilst we are having lesser numbers and slightly more days on market, I'm not seeing a price adjustment across the marketplace. Naturally, there is external influences that can obviously affect each particular property, but I'm not seeing a huge fluctuation in price. The only thing I am seeing is average days on market gently getting longer as we get closer to this potential election.
Okay, and I should ask you about those first-time home buyers and how difficult they're finding it at the moment in Canberra.
Yeah, first home buyers are quite a big portion of our marketplace, particularly at the moment. I am finding that first home buyers definitely have options. So our stock numbers are sitting slightly higher than what they once were. For instance, on average, we usually put 250 odd properties on the market every week, whereas last week we put on over 400. So there is quite a bit of stock for buyers to pick from, particularly in that first home buyer bracket. So that being said, we are transacting a lot of property to first home buyers, but they do have a lot of choice.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up there. Samantha, well done. You've sort of covered all of those major talking points in Canberra for us this morning, and enjoy your Wednesday. Thanks so much for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast.
Thanks for having me.
Explore new property destinations where you could live with exclusive interviews covering real estate news and market insights.
If investors see that everyone has moved away, they might decide to sell and take their capital and reinvest elsewhere, where we might see some more stock coming to market.
Yeah, just coming back to the gurus, there will be some people listening, Nikki, thinking, how can I become an investor guru? What sort of qualifications do you need?
Look, I'm sure they have qualifications and they have a large following social media where they share a lot of information. Sometimes, of course, we find that buyers agents become like online investor gurus and really explaining where to go and where to purchase, which could, in my opinion, really affect some strong investor groups going to certain areas and dominating those markets and seeing prices increase.
Give us a little bit of guidance around what are your protocols if we have a flood event.
Yeah, that is a great point. And again, it is in the lead up. You know, we had in our templates that to the tenants, look out at your local council for where your sandbags are. This is the number for SES. If you're experiencing this is our emergency contact. Please reach us on this number, and so on and so forth. So I think it is a great question, and it's a great point that investors could be asking managing agents that they're inquiring with.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.